Welcome back for another episode of A Woman's Strength, empowering stories from struggles to triumph. This podcast is a platform for women to share their stories of struggles and share their victories. Ladies, sharing our stories are twofold. It helps women who are listening to gain hope and courage to keep moving forward. And it helps the woman telling her story, look at how far I've come. Most of the time, for most women I know, that's with Jesus, that's with God. I'm Rosita Perez. I'm your host, self-discovery coach, and realtor. I get to help people find their way home, whether home is a physical home or if home is finding out the core of who you were made to be. Today, I am honored to have my guest, Nancy Grabe. Nancy is the driving force behind Foundational Family and a trusted parenting coach with over 4 decades of experience as a Christian counselor and therapist to prepare your children to face life's challenges with strength and dignity, drawing from her own life experiences and the lessons she's learned from raising 2 sons. Let me grab Nancy and get her on stage if you give me a minute here. There she is. Welcome, Nancy. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So, Nancy, let's go ahead and dive into it because we have 20 minutes to unpack your story and then close out the podcast. So, do you mind if we dive in right now?
Let's do it.
All right. If you would share a time where you faced a struggle.
Sure. So when I was in 3rd grade, I was struggling a lot. And Mrs. Brown announced one day during reading class, Nancy is mentally retarded and can't learn anymore. And children, you shouldn't play with her on the playground because it's probably contagious. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do with that information. And I didn't rush home and tell mom and dad. 1969, you didn't do that. And because if I had, my mom and dad would have said, well, what did you do? Or at least that's what I thought. And my parents picked up on that I had changed and things weren't so good. And they talked to the other parents and they got Mrs. Brown fired. Problem solved, right? Not so much. The problem was that my 9-year-old mind had to make sense of what was going on. And I came up with 2 solutions in my 9-year-old mind. One was that my parents didn't know I was retarded and I didn't want to tell them. Or 2, they knew I was retarded and they were embarrassed and we weren't supposed to talk about it. The problem is my 9-year-old mind didn't see the 3rd choice. It didn't understand that maybe Mrs. Brown was the one with the problem and that I was okay. So I carried that belief with me for years. And my mom and dad missed it. And they are terrific people. I loved my mom and dad. Super close. I had a great family. And, right, I always think great and. It's this hurt and I was hurting and feeling lost and stupid. And mom and dad really loved me and they wanted to help me. But I processed everything through that filter that I was retarded. Not a good filter. So dad would say, oh, you did really well. And I heard, oh, look, the little retarded girl tied her shoes. And that's a horrible way to go through life. It's hard to feel good about yourself. It's hard to be connected with other people. And as time went on, these kinds of things happened, and I looked for them, so I found them. I kept finding proof that what I believed was true, because God made our brains to make us right. If I believe I'm brilliant and wonderful and smart, I'm going to find proof of that. If I believe that I'm stupid and retarded, I'm going to find proof of that. And so the little things that people say, the little ways they act, we interpret them inappropriately. It kind of culminated for me in high school when I'm a poor test taker and I didn't think I was smart and capable. I took the entrance exam to my high school and I did really well in the logic. I am incredibly logical, and I can take those parts of the test and do great. In fact, I think that my scores were amongst the highest, if not the highest, that they'd had. But everything else, I came in at like the moronic level. So I go to school for 2 weeks and I'm taking honors socioeconomic geography and advanced biology and all these great classes, and I'm having a great time. And I get called down to the guidance counselor's office. And the guidance counselor, whose name God has let me forget, invites me in and says, "So, Nancy, do you know what it means to be a moron?" And I said, "Yeah. Why?" And he said, "Well, sometimes our moms and dads think that we're more capable than we are. And I think your mom and dad have expected too much of you. So I've changed your schedule, and now you're going to be taking all of these remedial classes." More proof that I am, in fact, retarded and can't learn anymore. And he hands me this schedule, pushes me out the door, and shuts the door. And I slid down the door jamb, and I just sat and sobbed. That really ugly cry? Everybody hates it. And I'm crying. And along comes Mr. Seegers, my honors socioeconomic geography teacher, the head of the department. And now he knew my dad because my dad had been on the board that picked all the books for the school and everything. And he's like, "What's wrong with Miss Graham?" And I was like, can't hardly talk. And I said, I'm not in your class anymore, as I hand him my new schedule. He went into the guidance counselor's office without knocking, slammed the door. There was some yelling. I have no idea what was said. And he came back out and said, "Do you know your schedule?" And I said, "No, you took it." And he goes, "No, not that piece of crap. The other one. Just go through your day. You're coming to my office after school." It's like, okay. And he became my mentor. I've been blessed beyond words. He coached me. He encouraged me. I ended up getting involved in theater. I was in charge of selling tickets for all the things at school. And in that moment, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't retarded and that I could. There's lots of little pieces to that story. But what ends up happening, Rosita, is that I get to the place where I'm at college and I'm blown away because the little retarded girl has made it to college. Yes. And I'm going to make it, and it's going to be okay. And I'm going to become a therapist, and I'm never, ever going to let children hurt like I did. I'm going to make the world better. And when we're 22, you can save the world. And then reality hits. But what happened to me in college was that I'm terribly dyslexic. And so I couldn't read and keep up with everybody else. So I would set up 2 study groups for every class I took. I go to the first one and I would learn, and I would write in my books and take notes. And then I would go to the second one and I would teach what I had learned, because if I could teach it, I knew it. And I had mostly A's and B's. I was a good student and I was doing great. And then I thought, here on the dorm floor, I have friends who are taking the psychology classes with me. I should go and study with them. And I walked in and I found 2 of my friends who had borrowed my notes, laughing hysterically. And I was like, "What's going on?" And they said, "I can't believe you have A's. Are you sleeping with our professors?" And again, all of a sudden, I was 9 years old. The reality is, the reason I tell those 3 big pieces is because those 3 pieces are what actually healed me. Mr. Seegers taught me to use coaching. He taught me to look for a mentor in my life. And because of what Mr. Seegers taught me, I was able to do all the coaching that I did, be in 2 groups, ask for help, meet with my professors, and do well. And then, because of what these girls said, I got tested and found out that I had dyslexia. And from that moment, I knew that part of healing was being able to know who you are.
Yes, absolutely. The internal battles that I hear that you struggle with at 9 years old, that we don't even know what we don't know, there became or birthed the limiting beliefs, right? Because you're being told by your teachers telling everybody in school. Did they ever tell your parents?
Mrs. Brown was mentally ill and ended up in a mental hospital. So, yeah, the parents figured it out.
Okay. So you struggled with that. At what point did you start saying, no, wait a minute, I need to do something to get out of this limiting belief because I believe I'm better than that?
I think that I tried multiple times, honestly, Rosita, between 9 and being what 14, 15 years old and in high school. And it was when Mr. Seegers walked down the hall, and to have someone else speak directly to the problem. My parents always told me, you're bright and capable, but they didn't see the problem that I saw, and I didn't feel safe to tell them about it. So they couldn't help me with what they didn't know about. And I think that teenagers in particular live a secret life, right? As parents, we don't always know what's going on. And we have to learn to read the nonverbal, to hear it beyond what they're saying, to learn to be good listeners. And that's what Mr. Seegers did for me, was he saw beyond that moment, and he coached me, and he helped me to start seeing what was good and right. And then I could start receiving from my parents, because I started to believe that maybe my 9-year-old self was wrong, that my parents had no idea, and that it maybe wasn't true.
Wow. And then from there, what strategy? I know you probably didn't know it was a strategy that you were doing at the time, but to continue on in that mindset, right? Because we can transform our mind, but if we don't know how to transform it, how do we get led? Of course, God is going to lead us. Can you think of one specific action that got you out of the rabbit hole?
Probably, like, there's lots of little ones, but
Right.
the big one probably was that whole mentorship thing. That when I got to college, I connected with one of my college professors. I also was a crazy woman and had an undergraduate degree in psychology, sociology, a minor in world religion and cultural anthropology, because I had to prove that I could do this. But I found a mentor in each of those areas, and I met with them on a regular basis, and I learned to check what I was thinking.
That is amazing that because that worked for you, or that blessed you when you were 9 years old, to have the teacher as your mentor and coaching you really right throughout the whole process and encouraging you that you are enough and that you are smart, instead of feeding the whole moron concept that the teachers and the principal or whomever was feeding into you. Because that's the whole thing, is that what are we feeding? Because you could have easily just kept feeding the moron side.
I could. I think that the other thing that I realize now, right, that I was a therapist, and I've been a therapist since 86, right, was that I thought at first I would just work with the kids, but the adults in the children's lives have to teach them, whether they have a disability or they don't, whatever belief system they've picked up, they need to teach them how to combat it. And we all, you're a mom, right? We want to be the best mentor and coach in our child's life. And so we need to learn to see beyond what we're seeing and to ask those questions and be curious. And that's what Mr. Seegers did for me, was he was curious. Why would you believe that? What is that about? Tell me about it. And he never, ever said to me, that's stupid. That's not true. This is what is true. He would validate my right to feel whatever I was feeling till I felt safe. And then in that safe space, I could receive the gift he had for me. And I don't know about you, but I know that was the biggest mistake I made as a mom at first, right? Is that our kids would say something and we go, no, that's not true. And we would try to tell them the truth. and they couldn't hear it and receive it because they didn't feel seen and heard. And so that's become my life's work, is teaching adults, parents, grandparents, how to see and hear and validate the experience or the feeling that the person's having, these people they love are feeling, so that they're willing to explore other possibilities with them. See, my mom and dad didn't know what I was thinking, didn't know to ask. And so they just kept telling me, and I couldn't hear it from them because I didn't feel safe. But had they been able to say, wow, Nancy, it seems like you're really struggling. What's that about? And when I said, well, I'm not very smart, my mom would go, wow, that must be really hard to feel like that. I could have then heard her say, this is how I experience you.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think that generation was very communicative, right?
They were communicative about other things, but they didn't know how to be good listeners like that, because children were to be seen and not heard. But my poor mom, I loved her to death. Really close with my mom. But on her deathbed, like not weeks before she died, she told me, she goes, I don't know why you always thought you had learning disabilities. You're really smart. And it was like, wow, we're still going to go there, Mom. But I was in a place finally, that I could say to her, well, I'm glad you always saw me that way. Yeah. I'm glad you saw the good in me.
Yeah. So Nancy, I love your story, and you just went right into the victory part of it with seamlessly. So I love that you, as a 9-year-old, were told that's where the birth of the limiting belief started, right? That you weren't smart enough, basically. And then you had a teacher come in and start to mentor you. And from that, you always made it a point, all the way to college and probably still today, where you have a mentor who is knowledgeable to help you along the way and coaching. And I love that. So while we are on this topic, I want to ask you, what advice would you give other women who maybe struggle with the learning disability and have not dealt with it? What would you say to them to help them get out of the rabbit hole?
I would tell women, and not just with learning disabilities, right? With disabilities or any limiting belief, because sometimes it's like you're not smart enough, or you're useless, or nobody cares about you, all of that stuff. 2 things. One is find a mentor, someone who's further down the road than you are. They don't have to be perfect, just further down the road than you are, and learn from them, and then turn back and give to someone behind you. Because when I can give, it strengthens me, right? But if I'm only receiving, then I tend to stay in a place of, I need other people, I can't do this. But if I get the receiving from my mentor, and then I give back to just behind me on the road, then we all ships rise together. And as you do that, you feel good about yourself. Other people want to come to you, and you're helping everybody, because then you're teaching the woman behind you to go to a mentor. You're learning to use your mentor, and you're feeling good about yourself.
Yeah. Spread the wealth, spread
Amen.
the love, right? When we are going through a tough time, go out and volunteer or help somebody else going through a tough time, because that feeds the spirit and lets us know that we're not alone, for one.
It's true. And I would encourage you never to do that without having something else feeding you. And that can be a therapist, it can be a friend, it can be a mentor, someone who's been through what you've gone through, but they're on the other side, or at least down the road from you, right? Because we have to fill the cup at the same time. Like, don't sit and lick your wounds, fill your cup, and then overflow onto the people behind you.
Absolutely. Nancy, we are coming close to the end of our time. Please let the people know how to reach you.
Probably the very best way to get to me is foundationalfamily.com. That's my website. And there's a place where you can send me messages. I am on Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram, it's Foundational Family. On Facebook, I'm Nancy Grabe. And I would really love to invite your listeners who are moms to come and join me. We've just started a parent power lunch, and we're talking about those communication skills. And whether or not you're a mom or a grandmother, or you're just an aunt who has little ones around you, and little ones can be 18 and 19 sometimes, right? But that you want to be able to talk to and have those good communication skills. We're going to talk about those skills every Tuesday at 12 o'clock. So reach out and check it out.
I love that. Is the information on your website?
It is.
Okay.
And it runs every Tuesday at 12 until 12:30. I'm going to get on a little early. So if people want to talk to me, then they can, and I will answer questions. And the third Tuesday of every month, we do Ask Me Anything. So I want to step in and be a mentor so that moms can be the mentor and coach to their own children.
I can just speak from my own experience. Had I had a mentor that was doing what you were doing, I think the dynamic would have been different because I was a young mom. I parented from how I was parented, but I also then it was like I was healing my little girl.
Yep.
When I was parenting, but that's not what my daughter needed because she's a completely different individual. So my childhood wounds, I was trying to heal through her, and I didn't know I was doing that. It wasn't until decades later I was like, oh, and that caused some challenges in our communication, my daughter and I's communication, our relationship. And now that we're both adults and healed or healing, right? Because that's a lifelong process.
Yes.
You don't arrive. It's like you still have a lot to unpack. But as you unpack, you start feeling more connected with the core of who you were made to be. And when you add Jesus to it, it's like you never stop being loved. Yeah. You have this confidence in you and this joy that nobody can take away. And you just have that desire to come from a place of curiosity. So I say all that to say, I love what you were doing. I think it's so incredibly important. And I'm looking forward to seeing what stuff is going to unfold from what you're doing.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to it. I love getting with moms and dads and helping them use the right yardstick for themselves. So don't beat yourself up. We're all going to fall short. I tell my kids all the time, nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. And the quality of a human being isn't in the mistakes you make. It's what you do after you've made the mistake. So Rosita and me, every other mom out there, we're going to make mistakes with our kids, but show them what godly men and women, what grown-ups do when they make a mistake. And that will go a million miles to fix things.
Not just to fix things, but to heal.
To heal.
Each of our hearts, right? Before we close, I want to thank you, Nancy, for just bringing this topic to light, right? Because there are a lot of parenting coaches, but your approach is so, I guess, is near and dear to my heart. So I know I'm not alone. I want to thank you for taking the time to be on my podcast, for being open and sharing your story.
Thanks for allowing me to come and talk. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Lastly, I want to invite you all to go to my website, movingforwardforlife.com, and schedule your complimentary clarity call. Take the time for you. This is 30 minutes for you to gain clarity on what your challenges are, because sometimes we don't know. And then allow me to give you one hot tip to help you move forward. 30 minutes, all for you, all about you. 30 minutes just for you. I mean, we have so much to do as women. We just keep going and going and going, and we don't stop to take care of self. So I want to end with this because I know Nancy would agree with this statement. And we would like to remind you that you are not alone. You have the power to choose the trajectory of your life. You have a choice. No matter how young or old you are, you can make a change in how you want your life to go. So thank you so much for coming, and we will see you next time. Bye.